If you've ever watched anything on YouTube about video games, you've almost certainly watched something derived from the work of James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd. The long-running show, its style, and the character of the nerd itself have inspired a countless number of other creators to step up with their own spins on online reviews of games and media, and these creators in turn have inspired another generation of creators themselves. And it's thanks to the show's popularity and impact over the last 15 plus years that AVGN was one of the first online creators to have its very own official video game. In fact, it's got two, and a remastered collection of these games is releasing today on PC and Nintendo Switch, and it'll be out later on down the road on other consoles. Featuring references and callbacks to many of the nerd's adventures, and wrapped up in the style of the bad 80s platformers that he would usually tear apart, does this game provide enough enjoyment to justify its $15 price tag, even if you're not a fan of the angry video game nerd? Or does this game's parody of bad games mean that it's itself a bad video game? Let's find out in today's review of a game based on a game reviewer by a game reviewer based on that game reviewer. Now, quick disclosure, I'm affiliated with Screenwave Media, the company responsible for both AVGN's content and the collection itself, and they provided me an early Steam copy of the game. I'm sure you might be hesitant to take my opinion now that I've said that, but those that know me know that I give every game an even shake irrespective of any conflicts that I may have. You don't get brownie points in my reviews just because I know you or work with you. That would tear away all of the integrity that I try to provide in these reviews and recommendations. And as is tradition here, this conflict also means that I'm going to start with my biggest criticism of the game in question. Almost nothing about AVGN 1 and 2 is original. Both AVGN games featured in this collection put you in control of the nerd himself as he's sucked into a bad 8-bit video game, the kind that he would normally review in his videos. Every level tends to be a spoof of some popular 80s game, from Ghosts and Goblins to Castlevania to Mega Man, with AVGN's trademark vulgar commentary popping up both in the over-the-top gory explosions when you die or defeat enemies, as well as in the nerd's text pop-ups throughout the adventures. Since these games are meant to essentially be playable episodes of the show, it makes sense that the game plays like a bad 80s game, but this ends up being more derivative than actual good commentary. The Castlevania level, for example, features every hard, difficult styling of an NES Castlevania game, but that's it. It doesn't stretch it any further than the bare minimum to be known as a Castlevania level. This is sadly true for the humor as well, as every joke is less of a joke and more of a flat reference to a gag from an AVGN episode. It never really takes that next leap past, "Hey, remember this? It's funny, right?" With a couple exceptions, most of which were added into the remaster and not featured in the original games, it doesn't expand on any of these references and make them funny on their own. It relies on humor from potentially decade-old episodes. Those of you that are AVGN mega fans will get a kick out of some of the smaller Easter eggs, but the game kind of feels like going to your high school reunion and finding out that people are only going to talk about their time in high school rather than anything that they've done in the years since. And for the record, I'm not a huge AVGN fan or anything. I enjoy the more recent videos, and I'll watch some of the older ones from time to time, but I've always been more of a fan of that second generation of YouTube game critics like Some Call Me Johnny, and despite this, I understood almost every single joke. That's how surface level the humor is. When AVGN Adventures originally released in 2013, this worked a lot better, but it's not as easy to go back to a retro revival kind of game when retro revivals have gotten better and more prolific in the years since. That's not to say the game itself is bad though. I actually quite enjoy the crisp platforming controls and the derivative levels, even if I find myself wishing that there would be more to them. AVGN 1 features 8 side-scrolling levels that you can play in any order, Mega Man style, and then an extra difficult final level after that. Meanwhile, AVGN 2 features about 20 shorter levels split into 5 world themes, though when I say shorter, the original game's levels never took me more than 12 minutes, usually only about 6 or 7 minutes on my first try, so these may as well be bite-sized in the second game, which I will say is perfect for the Switch. In both games, you'll be running and gunning with the nerd's blaster, and you'll find different sub-weapons occasionally a la Castlevania, which would be so much more helpful if the game didn't take these away from you the moment you died, even if you had them before you hit your most recent checkpoint. This one I can at least accept, as much as it might be mildly annoying, but then there's the nerd's very rare Super Scope upgrade that improves his blaster. If you so much as get hit, it's taken away from you immediately. That's a bit ridiculous, and it's a dangling carrot that's taken away far too quickly, and again, I know that's the point, but as I'll say a few times today, designing something poorly as a joke is still poor design. AVGN 2 also features some collectible hidden upgrades and a wall slide and wall jump taken straight out of Mega Man X, while the first game lets you switch between several hidden characters once you find them. These characters have some neat abilities, but none of them are ever required since they're all optional to begin with. Something like Mike Matei's higher jump can help you skip past a couple of annoying platforms, but I would have loved to see these characters instead brought in as part of the story so that we could see more than one or two really cool alternate paths to the finish line. It just sort of feels like yet another surface level missed opportunity. In both games, the remaster makes some additional changes and secret Easter eggs from the original release, including hidden versions of the nerd from the second game showing up in the past in parts of the first game to warn you when, say, the boss has been changed for the remaster. The nerd's arch-nemesis Fred Fuchs has also been changed to reflect the fact that he's now played by Gilbert Gottfried as of 2019, and he replaces the Nostalgia Critic as the Proto Man-styled mini-boss in AVGN 2. You can take that however you wish. I'm not sure why they did that, but I can take a guess. On top of all of this, there are 4 new bonus levels at the very end for those that have already played these games, which are meant to tie the two games' quote-unquote stories together, but this new ending doesn't actually do that at all, so, yeah. Lastly, there are a bunch of tweaks new to this collection that I would think greatly improve the experience over the originals. For example, on normal difficulty and below, many of the game's ruthless instant death blocks are replaced by spikes that just cause damage. The original games were meant to be intentionally unfair to instill in you that same rage as the nerd himself, but seeing how liberally these blocks were thrown around, as a big platforming fan, I just know that I wouldn't have found it a fun sort of challenge. With the new settings, you actually get to appreciate the level design a bit more than you otherwise would, and purists can still play on the classic difficulties if they want that challenge. Additionally, AVGN 1 and 2 removes the constant quips that the nerd would make after every single death, which on one hand means that we get fewer of his fuck-filled complaints, but on the other means that we also don't have to wait several seconds after every single death, in a game where death is intended to come more or less every 10 seconds. These changes also mean that the collection is pretty short. I completed the entire package in about 4 hours, while grabbing the 4 collectible nerd letters in all but 2 levels and unlocking most of the bonus characters in 1 and the character upgrades in 2. A playthrough on the original difficulties would take much longer, of course, thanks to all those instant death blocks being sprinkled back in, but I don't think the game's challenge is actually rewarding enough to justify that extra time spent fighting against intentionally bad game design. When you finish a level, you're more likely to shrug than sigh in relief and satisfaction. And there's something to be said about a game that's intentionally aiming to be a bad game actually just being a bad game, even if it's just for the sake of a joke, but I'll leave that for you to decide. On normal difficulty, I had a lot more fun than I expected to given the game's reputation, and these levels become much more salvageable when they're not intended to just piss you off. And really, it's solely because of this improved level design that I could even recommend the game at all, but do I recommend AVGN 1 and 2? Not exactly, no. The game's got enough content to justify that $15 price tag, but the content didn't really leave any impression on me past 1 or 2 particularly good moments. Because it's so derivative, it doesn't have much soul beyond the surface level AVGN references, and I don't think such shallow references are really going to be worth it enough for many longtime fans to dive into the otherwise average game right away. And if you're not a fan of the nerd, sure, you'll likely be able to put together most of the references just based on basic context clues, but there's not a lot here for you that other retro-styled indie games haven't done in a better, more innovative way. So, I do not recommend AVGN 1 and 2 at $15. I bet you didn't see that one coming when I mentioned my opening disclosure. I think if and when the game drops down to $7 to $10, it's a really solid retro platformer in a sea of much better retro platformers that usually go for around the same price. But if it's on sale, I think it would be a much better bang for your buck and much easier to justify regardless of whether you're a fan of the show or not. Until then, though, I don't really see a huge market for the game as is. But if you've played these games before, or you're a fan of the nerd, let me know in the comments if you're going to be picking the remasters up, or if I've helped you decide whether to buy the game or not. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I try to release about 1 new video every week, and they're usually a good time, I think. I don't really know. If you want to watch another video of mine, last week I talked about Microsoft's 6 different Game Boy Advance games, including the very first Xbox game released on a Nintendo system. I'll throw that somewhere on screen if that sounds up your alley. Until next time, everybody, stay golden. I'd also like to give a special thank you to all of my Patreon supporters for all of their support. I didn't script this part, so that was pretty redundant. Those supporters include Wolfko-san, Goldstorm07, Matthew0606, and Buckles Chucklow. If you want to become a Patreon producer on this channel and get access to exclusive perks such as the exclusive Golden Bolt Discord server, you can visit patreon.com/thegoldenbolt. Thank you.